Hello everyone, my name is Kendall Smith. I will be a senior next year pursuing a dual degree in dance performance and film production, and I currently hold a position in the Honors College as the student marketing team lead. So this tutorial today is how to make better films for class projects, for fun, etc. from a film major. So this lesson isn't really about how to make the film in general. This is just how to make them a little bit better. So if you have a project coming up in a business class or in any other major where you need to make a film, this is how you can take your films to the next level to impress your teachers and possibly get a better grade. All right, let's get started. So filming. One big thing that I see sometimes is inconsistency between filming vertically and horizontally. The professional way to do it is horizontally unless you need to do like a TikTok or an Instagram story. So just stick to filming horizontally and keep that consistent throughout the entire film. There's also something called the rule of thirds. If you see in the picture on the top, we have the screen split into thirds on both the vertical and the horizontal. And so where those points meet, those lines meet to make a point, is where the audience members naturally tend to look. And so if you have someone's eyeline there or something super important, it's nice to put it on one of those dots because it's just a natural good place for an audience member to look. Not super duper important for class projects, but I guarantee you'll make your films look a slight bit better. Blurring the background is great, but that takes a camera with a nice lens. The different lenses on different cameras are able to produce depth of field, therefore putting one thing in focus and blurring out the background. If you have a camera that can do that, that's amazing because it allows the audience to focus on whatever is in focus and just kind of ignore the stuff in the background. And it also looks very cinematic. But just one thing to make sure your peaking is turned on if it's on your camera. What that does is it highlights the things that are perfectly in focus in a certain color. Usually it's red, but sometimes you can change it. That allows you to make sure that you actually are in focus and you're not just eyeballing it, because then once you start watching it on the computer, you're like, wait, that was kind of blurry, and then that's no good. All right, stability. Sometimes it's not very fun to watch videos that are handheld because they're very shaky and it's just distracting a little bit. And so if you have a tripod, that's great. Or what I'm doing right now, my phone is propped up against a lamp that's stacked up on two different speakers. So that is allowing my phone to stay stable. I didn't have to pay for a tripod or anything else. You could just totally do that with the things that you have at home. Just get creative with it as long as it's safe and your camera won't drop to the floor. There's also fancy things like stabilizers that I have one for my phone. It's like a little over $100, so I mean, not a great investment if you're not going to be filming all the time. But it keeps my phone stable as I'm moving around. So there's like a button on the back of it I can hold, and just like barely jiggling will keep like the phone like extra steady, which is really cool. But it's nice for moving shots because it creates smooth movements. But you can also create smooth movements on a skateboard, which is pretty cool. I've seen some really creative shots done where people didn't have a fancy stabilizer, but they were just standing on a skateboard and someone was like pushing them around. That's a fun thing to try. Or even someone sitting in the back of a trunk of a car pulling away as someone's walking. It looks beautiful and it takes a lot of work, but if you want those beautiful smooth shots, then that's the way to go if you don't want to pay extra. All right, checking for continuity. So sometimes, a lot of times for class projects, things that aren't super duper important, you're just like, I'm just gonna go on set and just figure it out and without very much preparation beforehand with the shots. But that's the importance of a storyboard and shot list. Creating those beforehand will help tremendously during the production stages, so you don't have to worry about, oh, I forgot to shoot this part, or oh, this cutting to this doesn't look right. There's just some kind of weird transition with it. So thinking about what shots you want beforehand, writing it down, however you think will work for your brain the best, is the way to go. And it also helps with communication amongst the other people on set. And that's an example of a storyboard right there. We have a drawing of what's happening, little voices of what they're saying, camera directions such as panning and tilting, and then some lines and the shot number. Audio. This is fun. When I went to film school, I really didn't have much knowledge on film, but this is one of the most eye-opening moments for me, which is, now to me it's very obvious, but audio is recorded separately from the video. In this case, I'm using my iPhone as a camera and audio. I'm doing it from the same spot, and that's fine because I'm super close to the camera and you can hear me great. But there are lots of circumstances where you're going to be filming maybe people talking that are far away, and there's no way you're going to hear them, especially like if you're on GCU campus. People are going to be walking by, you hear people behind you, you hear your own breath because you're filming. That's why we have the boom mics, which you typically see and sometimes you catch in movies. You're like, oh, the boom mic came down. So basically, a boom mic or any kind of microphone, you would need to put it close to whoever is speaking or whatever you want noises of, and try to hide it away from the camera. And in this picture, you can see, this is from Schitt's Creek. They have their boom mic overhead, and so they'll be able to catch their voices up high without the camera seeing them. And the camera is farther, actually that one's kind of close, but still, you do not want to use camera audio because camera audio does not sound good at all. You have to go with a microphone. But if you don't have a microphone, you can use your iPhone because that actually does have pretty good sound. Sometimes I've been on set with fancy microphones and just something ends up not working. Like we ran out of batteries, or the device itself isn't working, or something just goes wrong. And I always have a little bit of peace of mind knowing that the iPhone isn't all that bad for recording audio. So some things that we end up doing is just taping an iPhone to a long pole and using that as our boom mic. It's not as bad as you would think. So if you have like a broomstick, some tape, and your phone, you can go ahead and use that. And the clapper, what you see on the top right part of your screen, is something that I knew kind of what it was, but I didn't really know the practicality of it until I started doing films myself. But it is actually very helpful for editing. So this helps you edit the video and the audio together, and so you're not watching someone talking and their voice is off with their mouth. You would like to have that all match up. So the clapper, it has the scene number on it and what take it was, so that helps the editor figure out what order things need to go in and which of the takes are the good ones and which ones you can put off to the side. Probably not going to use them. But the noise that this makes allows you to match up the audio to the video to make sure that the rest of the video is going to be matched up. They use a clapper because it makes one loud direct noise, and so it's much easier to match that up than just like me talking right now. That's a little bit harder to like eyeball and listen to. But if you don't have a clapper, which most of you probably don't, another thing you can do is just clap yourself. Just make sure that your hands are visible in the camera and that your audio is turned on so you can hear it. And so then in the edit, you can just mush the two up and then everything else lines. Make sure you cut it off. You don't want you don't want your film to show this in it, but that just helps for the rest of it. All right, room tone. Room tone is very important as well, and that's something I learned in film school too. The reason why we use room tone is to help with transitions between two different cuts. And you're probably wondering, like, what is room tone? Well, room tone is when you tell everyone on set, everyone, to be quiet for at least 30 seconds. And so everyone's quiet, and then you record sound for about 30 seconds of just whatever the room sounds like. It could be outside, inside, and you just record that. And then if you like listen to it over again, you might hear like cars driving by or the air conditioning or nature sounds. But this helps when you put it in the edit to have it down at the bottom and just have like a smooth, consistent noise throughout the entire thing, even though your main audio is going to be choppy cutting for each shot. And so if you still don't really understand what I'm saying, I'm going to show you what one film I did where we forgot to take room tone, and then it's a kind of like a jarring like cut audio wise. So let's go ahead and watch this.
All right, everyone. See you later. That's it.
All right, another thing you need to know for filming, this is a little bit more formal, but it's just good practice to get into to make sure that the camera is turned on, that the sound is turned on, that you know what shot you're gonna shoot, and when the actors are gonna start and stop. So the director usually starts with saying quiet on set, just to make sure everyone is quiet, even people that are walking by. And then they yell camera, and the cameraman hits record and then says rolling to symbolize that they're rolling. And rolling just means back when the cameras weren't digital, when they had like the film actually rolling, that's why they still get rolling. Then the director says sound, and then the audio recorder hits record and says speeding. And then the slate walks into frame, the clapper, and they say scene 1, take 5, and then claps their hands or claps the board and then steps away. And then once they are completely out of the frame and are stopped making their footsteps and all that, then the director can say action. The whole scene goes through, and then when the director thinks that it's done, they say cut. So here's an example of a film I shot of us doing it, not following the script exactly, but very, very similar.
Rolling.
Sound speeding. C90/E, take 2, marker. Action.
Leaving so soon. Cut.
Lighting. Lighting's really fun because you can do so much with it to help with creativity or even just to make it look a lot more realistic. So do not just turn on the overhead lights. Don't be in a classroom and go, yay, I turned the lights on, let's start shooting. If you really don't have any other lights and you're kind of desperate, sure, that's okay. It's better than shooting in the dark, but that is just not the way to go with professional filmmaking and making things look very nice on screen. So there's this thing called 3-point lighting, where in this picture, the diagram, you see that there's the key light, the fill light, and the backlight. And so the key light is going to be your brightest light that's going to be illuminating your object or your face, but not straight forward, because you want a little bit of shadows on your face. If you shoot it straight forward, your nose won't cast any shadow. Which, I mean, if you wanted to tell a story specifically like that, you can do that, but typically it's off to the side a little bit to provide a little bit more contrast. So, but then that might be too much contrast, so that's where the fill light comes in. That comes in from the other diagonal, and it is a little less bright to help fill in those shadows so they're not super contrasting. And then lastly is the backlight. Sometimes you'd notice in films how they have like a little bit of like some kind of light on the back of their head, on their hair, to like separate them from the background. That just is like the extra cherry on top to make the lighting look very good. And so in the picture on the bottom left of your screen, the first picture of the girl is just with the key light. And then the second picture is with the fill light as well. You see her shadows are a little less shadowy. And then the third picture is the backlight, which I don't know why they used red. I don't think it looks too good in this picture, but it just helps separate her from the background a little bit. But you're probably saying, well, I don't have these really cool studio lights. Those aren't mine, by the way. I'm living in someone else's house at the moment who's a film producer. So you don't have lights like that. What are you gonna use? Well, actually, I've used an iPhone flashlight for some shoots too. Sometimes a whole bunch of people have gotten their iPhones and stuck it like under a chin for like a scary scene or something. In this case, it was a girl crying in her closet, and so we shot with a few iPhones like pointing down on the floor on a reflector, and it was reflecting up on her face, but we also had other lights around, but that just added a little touch. So iPhone flashlights are good if you're shooting a darker scene and you can have the availability to get up close to your actress without the camera seeing it. Lamps actually can work pretty well if you take the lampshade off and turn it on, especially the white lights. Well, it depends on what you're going for. If you want something a little bit warmer or cooler, you can just place lamps around the room, either seen or unseen, sometimes practical lights, which are lights that are seen like a normal lamp. That could help a lot. But you can also have them behind the scenes pointing in a certain direction, and pretend that they're stage lights, even though they're just normal lamps with their lampshade off. And reflectors. Reflectors are really nice too. In the next slide, I'll show you a picture with me with a fancy reflector, even though they're probably not that expensive. But reflectors are helpful, especially when you're outside and let's say like the sun's behind you and you just almost look like a silhouette, like you can't even tell your facial features. You would hold a reflector out in front of the person and it would bounce the light off from the sun if you hold it at the right angle, and then bounce the light back onto the subject's face. And you don't have to have a fancy reflector to do that. If you have a mirror or even a whiteboard, a white sheet, depending how sunny the day is, that would work just as good. So here's a picture of me holding a reflector. This one in particular has a gold side, a silver side, a white side, and a black side. And then if you take the whole thing off, it's white but a little bit more transparent. So this is for lighting outdoor scenes. You'll probably shoot some outdoor scenes for your school projects or for fun, but this will just help make the lighting a little bit better. Like I said earlier, if the sun's a backlight, use the reflector in the front, bounce the light from the sun onto the subject. If there are some weird shadows on your subject, like you're under a tree and you just see all the tree branches on your face and you don't really like that, someone could stand up high and hold a sheet. Like I have a white sheet in my car. My roommate told me like that as a film major, you gotta have a white sheet in your car. It becomes so helpful for reflecting light or blocking light, or like cleaning things up or putting it on the ground to set equipment down. Just food for thought. So you can hold up a sheet or something to block those weird shadows. And then if it's a cloudy day, that's typically, it's personally my favorite. That's kind of my aesthetic. I like a little bit more evenly dispersed lighting. So lucky you if that's the case, if it's cloudy. But you might want to add your own lights if you want a little bit more contrast. You might not need something too powerful, but you can still use a reflector, an iPhone light, whatever you have to do that. All right, set design. This can take your film to the next level, definitely. And so the very first picture that you see on this slide is from a film I did last year. And that plant was not originally there, but it just makes the shot look so much better. Like, imagine without the plant, there was actually like an ugly little white light switch there, and I would have drawn the eyes of the audience members and it just wouldn't have looked very good. So adding plants is definitely the way to go. Also just making sure it's not too busy in one area, too cluttered, or anything that is distracting for the viewers. You just want the viewer to look exactly where you want them to look and just have it look nice around it. So even if that means organizing papers a little bit, moving things out of the way, rearranging furniture, it's totally worth it. One thing I've learned is, even though nobody's house is like this, well, it might be, nobody has like their couches and their stuff like pushed away from the wall. Usually it's up against a wall. Typically furniture is like that. But if you are doing a video, someone's sitting on the couch and right behind them is a wall, there's just not much depth, there's not much separation with the subject from the background. And so for filming purposes, it's okay to move the couch a little bit away from the wall. And if you want to get even fancier, you can put a light on the ground behind the couch and shine upwards. Sometimes we do that with fun colors. We have a lot of our friends have light sticks that have lots of different colors on it, and it helps create different feelings and moods. And so sometimes we'll put it behind the couch or behind a TV just to add a little extra pizzazz to the shot. Yes, I told you about adding plants. Cover up anything ugly, if it's an outlet, a wall scuff, etc. And then slashes of light. This is getting real technical here if you're like super like cinematic and all that. The very last picture on here, I did not do this shot, but that is a fancy way of making some pretty cool slashes on a wall, but honestly you can do this with any light you have, a black piece of paper with some slits in it and someone holding it up. You can create the same look with that. It's just a little less easy when you have to have a human hold it instead of a tripod. So the picture in the middle is from a shoot I did, and our teacher gave us the correction, like, it's just too blue, there's no nice separation, you need like a slash of light or something behind, or like an orange or a yellow slash of light. So having the slash from the bottom picture just up at the top behind the girl would have just made her stand out a little more and just looked a little bit more cinematic. Editing. So once you've shot everything, shot all your audio, your room tone, and your video, it's time to start editing. And so first things first, make sure your audio and video match up, or else it's very distracting. And then you're going to add that room tone underneath and change the volume of that. Make sure the room tone is not overpowering whatever voices are being heard or things that need to be heard, or else you're like, what? I can't tell what they're saying. Like, it just sounds like fuzz. So make sure it is the volume is turned down for that. And if it doesn't cover the whole film, just like copy and paste it a whole bunch of times until it like goes through the entire film, and you might have to fade those in between each other to keep it consistent. All right, aspect ratio, that is something that I really like, super easy to do, and it just makes things look like an actual movie. It like turns it from this to like widescreen. So it's adding black bars on the top and bottom of your frame, and I'll show you an example of that soon. There's two ways to do color with film. There's color correcting and color grading. Color correcting is helping to make something look normal. So if you're shooting something and you look at it and you're like, oh, that looks a little too blue, her skin looks a weird color, then color correcting would get it to look normal. Color grading, on the other hand, is used more creatively to make a feeling or mood or whatever feeling you're going for the film. And so with that, you can be a little more creative, add a little more craziness if you want, whatever fits within your mood of the scene. And so maybe that means like making everything a little bit more green. There are some films you've probably seen where everything is colored a certain way, but you know that's not natural. Like, that's what color grading is. As long as you don't go too crazy, color grading can be a good thing and can be used subtly in pretty much everything. One thing I discovered recently is warp stabilizer. This is on Premiere Pro, but I'm sure it's on lots of other more complicated editing softwares. If you shot something, let's say you're kind of like running with the camera, but it's a little jiggly, just dragging and dropping warp stabilizer on there. It analyzes things frame by frame, so it takes a long time, but it just smooths everything out. It kind of zooms in a little bit, it reduces that jiggle. And so even on things where you think you're still, but you're still like holding it with your hands, adding that warp stabilizer on there will just take your shots from smooth to even smoother and makes it look like you use professional grade equipment to make those smooth shots. And so I've used that a lot for a lot of the honors college videos of events, just dragged and dropped it onto every clip, waited a long time and watched it again. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I shot that with my hands. I did, but it's warp stabilizer. And then exporting, that is when you're completely done editing and you want to make it into that final file, compress everything. I suggest H.264, which is MP4, that's a common format, and there's also MOV, which is very common too. There's other ones you can do for different things, whatever your teacher tells you to do, or client, but those two are typically the most popular. And make sure your file size isn't too big, so definitely stay under 1 gigabyte. I had someone submit a dance film to me for a dance show at GCU, and it was 13 gigabytes for like an 8-minute film, and that is ridiculous because for reference, like a whole entire DVD is about 4 gigabytes, and that holds like full-length movies and pretty darn good quality on there, and so there is no reason to have a 13 gigabyte film. So in order to do that, when you're exporting, just just check the bit rate, check certain things. On Premiere Pro at the bottom it says how big your file is. Just kind of monitor that and move some things around, but it should compress it pretty well for you. So just check that, keep it under 1 gigabyte so it doesn't take forever to load onto computers to export and to transfer, because that's a lot of space when it could look just as good at smaller quality. All right, this is from that same film that I showed you earlier, the original footage, which I actually went with because I didn't know how to color correct and color grade very well, and I was on a little time crunch. That's originally what it looked like, but look how much better it could have looked if I added the black bars on top and bottom and color corrected it a little bit. See, her skin looks a little more normal, a little bit tanner. The lights in the background look a little bit oranger, and the black bars on top and bottom make it look like it's an actual movie. All right, the next one is Warp Stabilizer. So this was from the Honors Banquet last year. This shot, I was just with my hands like going like this on that bottle, and it was a little shaky. It wasn't very smooth, but when I dragged and dropped Warp Stabilizer on it, it just looks so much better. And then this is a screenshot from Premiere Pro. I searched warp in the effects, found that, and just dragged and dropped it right onto that clip. And so that's the end of the presentation. That is a lot of the fun facts that I've picked up through my years of film school, and I hope that you guys can use it and apply to your films, whether you're just making a passion project for fun during college, or you're making a video for a client, for a teacher, for a project, or just are interested in film in general and the things that go on behind the scenes. So I hope you learned at least one thing from this video, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at the Honors College or reach out to another film major. We're always happy to help out. We're always in need of actors, so if you're interested in acting, like find a film major, tell them that you're interested in that, and they'd be happy to have you on set, happy to have you act, and all that. It's so much fun, and it's been one of the most fun things to do on campus so far in my 3 years at GCU. So see you guys next year on campus. Have a great rest of your summers. Stay safe and lopes up.